The Fall Guy is a masterclass in genre through irony that I'm honestly surprised isn't talked about more. Grossing a worldwide total of about $181 million, The Fall Guy still fell a little short from a monetary standpoint, as it missed the nearly $300 million it would have needed to make in order to break even. On top of that, it didn't absolutely tank among critics and fans alike, as with other action comedies, but it didn't receive raving reviews either. While a consistent audience to critic rating is usually a positive for any film, especially a standalone with an original plot and true to its self-direction style, an unfortunate rarity in the current Hollywood climate, what surprises me is less of the film's performance and more the cultural clout and influence it's failed to garner, meaning that regardless of Hollywood's response to it, there doesn't seem to be much talk about it anymore. It's failed to withstand the test of time and permeate the current dialogue and trends of social platforms, and will honestly be a film that, to many people, will be criminally forgotten. To me, this is a concern, as it's not only one of the best action comedies we've gotten within the past decade or so, but also one of the smartest and most interesting cinematic experiences that more people should be talking about. If I asked you to think through the past decade, would you be able to name 3 action films off the top of your head that haven't belonged to a cinematic universe, been a remake of a previous franchise, or been a spin-off of some other story we're all familiar with? Other genres such as drama and sci-fi fantasy aren't excluded from this problem either. Now, this isn't to say that an adaptation or a remake isn't an art form of its own. We can't just exclude the thousands of hours of time and effort put in by countless individuals to bring these new films to life, despite the fact that they've got a well-placed cushion of cultural familiarity placed under them. Because if there's anything that I've learned as an artist, creating anything that you're passionate about is the most amazing but also terrifying and excruciating process. So I'll go ahead and apply a healthy disclaimer by saying that not all of said films are bad. In fact, I'm a firm believer that there are no bad films. Just weirdos who think they should make films when maybe they shouldn't. And before any of you come at me in the comments fuming about how The Fall Guy was based off the TV show from the 80s, I know. This is the whole purpose of my essay, because while The Fall Guy does fall into this category of adaptation/remake that I've been harping on, it also does something completely unique that not many others have dared to do. It uses irony. In fact, it delivers a masterclass in irony that not only does the action comedy genre justice, but also the stunt community for a number of reasons that we'll be exploring in this video essay. Now, I know what you may be thinking, duh, it's an action comedy, and an action comedy in the 21st century, no less. Saying that it uses irony in a unique way is about as simultaneously vague and obvious as the finance bros telling you that it's time to open a 401k. So, let me just explain, because in this case it uses irony to develop a key component that many comedies are missing nowadays. A component that is exactly what makes The Fall Guy worthy of cultural significance. Associated with both tragedy and humor, irony is a storytelling device used to represent a juxtaposition between expectation and reality, with origins dating all the way back to not just great playwrights such as Shakespeare and Euripides as a storytelling device. The idea of irony also played into classical ideals that aimed to better understand society and politics, existing alongside the genesis of schools of thought attributed to the likes of Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. It was through these figures, as well as other philosophers, that we developed the understanding we have now of both the physical sciences such as astronomy, physics, chemistry, and geometry, as well as the practical such as economics, rhetoric, politics, ethics, and poetics. As such, we can place our understanding of irony as not just that sarcastic comment that nobody understood, and more as a concept deeply rooted in a bunch of really smart guys basically inventing the patterns that our basic human instincts have developed in response to our progress into complex societies. Knowing what we do now about irony, it becomes clear to see that irony also has a purpose beyond just a cheap laugh and is meant to represent the deeper knowledge of complex societal issues.
Stop it. Get some help.
There is a common pattern, especially in today's digital world, as social media capitalizes on the virality of not just what's funny, but how well you know what other people think is funny. Take the meme, for example. How many of the most trending memes nowadays have comedic value based purely on prior knowledge, the deeper lore, or where the meme comes from? How many of these memes are nearly impossible to understand and therefore get a laugh from without this knowledge? In this way, the irony comes not from the meme, but rather the subversion of expectation from an already established joke. A joke for which, if you don't already know the punchline, you likely will miss altogether. And is this not the very point of TikTok sounds altogether? And literally the mechanism that allows them to become as viral as they are? Rather than coming from something completely authentic, the comedic impact comes from knowledge of the original context of the sound and how it either juxtaposes or further heightens the visual situation someone has chosen to pair it with. It's the reason that there are TikToks that unpack Zara Larsson's dolphin trend, why she added a dolphin light show to her concerts to a song she released 7 years ago at the drop of a hat, and why we we laugh at a bunch of old ladies jumping around in a swimming pool in dolphin swimsuits. We laugh not just because of the absurdity, but because of the social irony at play. Because just like them, we're in on the joke. It's the reason why we laugh at how Not Like Us has been reused, or Defying Gravity, regardless of whether or not the actual video is funny, and rather because we know where the sound comes from, and it's funny to see the two situations juxtapose one another. And it's in this juxtaposition, the space between reality and expectation, that we are entertained and find humor. Irony is meant to be used to say less than what you mean. The point here being that you say less, thus creating more space for the audience to put the pieces together and feel acknowledged for being intelligent. This provides a natural way for the audience to stay engaged, as we are naturally drawn to not only patterns, but the payoff we feel as we begin to anticipate what the next one will be. We as humans are wired to find connection and meaning as a survival instinct, so when it comes to mere entertainment, of course we're going to engage with something that actually treats us like we're intelligent. Different kinds of irony are also crucial to understanding the genre of a film, as the way irony is used between different genres will change, or the genre can likewise have an effect on how that irony comes across. There's situational irony when an expected outcome is subverted, a doctor getting the flu, or the final boss in a game being just some guy in a lab. Verbal irony is when what we mean is different from what we actually say, such as "I'm dead," or "that was my 13th reason." And then there's dramatic irony, or as I like to call it, the Alfred Hitchcock irony, used as the writer lets the audience in on something that a character doesn't know. It's the ticking time bomb under the table irony, and also the terribly hidden true feelings in a romantic comedy irony. In The Fall Guy, we see isolated moments of said irony when Colt misses going to karaoke with Jodie and Gail swoops in to make Jodie believe Colt has left her, or when Jodie is beating the crap out of Colt in the trailer because he's in the alien costume. And while these moments are humorous and do a great job of challenging our expectations based on knowledge we're in on as the audience, they aren't the use of dramatic irony that make this film as the incredibly underrated masterpiece that it is. This is better recognized in Metal Storm, the movie within a movie, or the Carnivalesque. See if you can find a movie to match this plot. A hero, existing among a society laced with rules and expectations, is forced to flee to a world outside of the various plots surrounding them. In this world, chaos ensues as the way the previous world works is challenged in almost every way, leading to misunderstandings, uncovered secrets, and a whole lot of running around in circles. In the end, though, the zaniness and deception are what allow each character to fully develop, leading to a happy ending for the protagonists and the revelation of each character's true nature. Sound familiar? You could have been thinking of Alice in Wonderland, with the literal world of Wonderland acting as this magical adventure, or maybe Narnia or Spirited Away. For a comedy, we could consider Elf or Freaky Friday, and when it comes to drama, a good example would be The Substance, or if you're wanting a pretty literal example, The Greatest Showman. In each of these genres, there seems to be a different experience, a different world entirely that the characters must step into that directly challenge and unravel the established norms of the society they're used to. In this world, they get the opportunity to don masks, to change and be something they wouldn't usually be, leading to a path of self-discovery through not only challenging a norm, but how that influences the characters they interact with. It's a place in the narrative full of misdirection, the unexpected, and sometimes uncomfortable, with the fitting name of the Carnivalesque. Per Wikipedia, the Carnivalesque is a literary mode that subverts and liberates the assumptions of the dominant style or atmosphere through humor and chaos. Dating all the way back to Greek philosophy and entertainment just as irony, the Carnivalesque has been a device used in storytelling pretty much as long as societies have been structured through expectations and norms. Now, it's worth saying that the point of this essay isn't to demonize societal expectations and norms, as they are literally how we function as human beings. It's human nature to want to organize things, as being able to quickly recognize situations is what allows us to make judgments and help us survive. It all goes back to that basic fight or flight response, and to say that these norms are intentionally devised can often be a miscalculated and instigating statement. However, that doesn't mean that we all haven't been hurt by the norms that other people place on us. So for the purpose of this essay, I'd like to focus on the specific societies at hand, avoiding judgment of their norms in the name of understanding the most we can about how these literary forms work. I'll leave their overall impact and meaning up for you to decide when it comes to considering your own personal norms based on the society you're in. Among countless poets, authors, and artists throughout the ages, William Shakespeare is a master of using this mode to not only comment on the climate he lived in, but also craft incredibly entertaining stories, because who doesn't fantasize about a life they never dreamed of having? Specifically, I'd like to focus on As You Like It, as it relates to The Fall Guy in more ways than one. But seriously, the more I researched for this essay, the more weird coincidences I found between the two that helped in solidifying my overall argument that The Fall Guy knows exactly what it's doing as an action comedy and does it way better than any other action comedy I've seen. Upon watching it for the first time, I honestly thought I was crazy because I kept coming back to As You Like It for some reason until I finally realized why. As You Like It is a pastoral comedy that revolves around Rosalind and Orlando, with both being the children of powerful figures at court. With the death of Orlando's father, conflict arises between Orlando and his older brother, Oliver, and Rosalind gets banished from court, leading to both of their refuge in the Forest of Arden, among other characters. In this space, a place outside the pressures of court and the real world that seems to possess almost fantastical and unexplainable qualities, we see various characters take on roles they would never have been able to at court. Rosalind, having fallen in love with Orlando before fleeing to the Forest of Arden, cross-dresses as a young boy Ganymede, and uses her friendship with Orlando in the forest as a means to help him woo her. As Orlando doesn't realize that Ganymede is actually Rosalind, this works perfectly until the truth is finally uncovered. Rosalind's cousin Celia becomes Aliena. Duke Sr. and his men live humble lives as they live off the forest rather than the lavish court life they're used to. Even Orlando is able to repair his relationship with his brother, as the forest seems to relieve the pressure of primogeniture and the struggle for birthright. In essence, the Forest of Arden is the carnivalesque of As You Like It, a place that uses irony in order to comment on complex societal issues. Especially in Shakespeare's time, society was built on court life and valuing important figures, especially royals, as the standard. The people were to be inspired by them and respect them. And yet the whole point of the play is that characters learn a new part of themselves outside of court or the life they were taught to idealize by society. This is especially clear as Duke Sr. himself describes that he feels safer in the Forest of Arden than he ever did at court. Not just ironic to the situation of the plot, but significant to the cultural climate of this play as a whole. Another great example is Rosalind, or rather Ganymede, helping Orlando woo herself. The irony here being not just in what the audience knows that Orlando doesn't, or even the fact that Orlando seems to start falling in love with Ganymede, but also that Rosalind is meant to be a refined lady of the court. Her time spent in the Forest of Arden allows her to grow, but this growth is less of her taking on the societal attributes of a man in order to get what she wants, and rather how this mask, this disguise, helps her to find the confidence to develop feminine qualities contrary to that time. She becomes bolder, direct, she's able to speak her mind and articulate clearly how she wants to be treated by Orlando. Qualities that really aren't specific to any gender, yet society has had a way of manipulating our perception of them. In certain cultures, when a man is bold, he's doing it to be courageous, to protect or provide, to be manly, but sometimes when a woman does, she can be seen as accusatory, dramatic, or even manipulative. This isn't to say that this is an all-encompassing experience for every man and woman, so we can at least consider this angle from a 16th century perspective, as even the very rights women were allowed were much different than what we have today. Thus, what the audience was viewing was much different than what they were expecting, but I think it's so cool that we can see that irony withstands the test of time through powerful writing. Although societies have changed, we can still feel the cultural impact and resonate with the themes such as gender, hierarchy, nature, and deception, but in different ways. And the characters recognize this as well. In their escape to nature, their nature is revealed. Each of them are privy to the fact that they are existing in a world outside their own, and much of the most comedic moments are spent blatantly pointing the tropes playing out by Jacques and Touchstone, creating the final layer of irony that is what makes the carnivalesque work for this specific genre, not just here, but in The Fall Guy as well. Through a use of irony that understands the carnivalesque in which it exists, As You Like It and The Fall Guy alike prove themselves to be masterpieces that understand their genre, leading to their overall success where other comedies fail. There are so many examples of action comedies out there, or just outright action movies that just don't understand how to use irony the right way, turning them into blazing dumpster fires of forced punchlines, kitschy modern dialogue, and an annoying level of self-awareness. An unfortunate example is the ironic insincerity of Thor, Love, and Thunder, which can't seem to get us to care about anything even remotely detrimental to the plot because it's so busy trying to make everything ironic in some way, or at least in the way it thinks irony should be used for a comedy. But therein lies the problem. The film's official genre is action-adventure. That's right. In a film where we have space Muppets, some of the cringiest dialogue to curdle my ears, and a decade-old screaming goat gag that has me thinking about Vine for the first time in 5 years, we're also trying to tell a superhero story branded as an action-adventure. A story that depicts children being kidnapped by someone hell-bent on killing gods, the main character's love interest having a terminal disease that he doesn't find out about until it's pretty much too late, and the list goes on and on. Not only is this a deeply concerning misrepresentation of complex issues, but also an embarrassing depiction of just how out of touch the industry has become with the basic fundamentals of storytelling. Because instead of using irony in an appropriate way to add suspense to action and adventure moments, or even lean into being an action comedy, the film instead decided to do neither, and here's how. Take this moment when the hero and the love interest are finally working together again, and the filmmaking is trying to play up the awkwardness yet excitement of seeing them together, a scene that also acts as a way to change up the pace and ease up some tension. Now, I could make an entire video about the absolutely terrible use of stagecraft or the volume, basically Disney's new all-immersive solution to blue and green screen, but for the purposes of this already behemoth of a video essay, I'll leave it at this. To put it simply, ever since Endgame, something about Disney and filmmaking in general when it comes to big IPs has just felt off visually. And I've been doing a lot of research as to why specifically, hoping that other people would find the answer as obvious as it is to me. But all I really discovered was while there are others who feel like they look like absolute crap, I feel like I'm the only one who thinks it's the biggest thing ruining these movies. Meaning, yes, even after terrible plots, acting, and writing, the visual effects, cinematography, and editing are the true culprit to me. Rather than finding a solution to the problem, such as a weird editing style or maybe just a camera lens that I wasn't used to yet, all I've really found is that people actually think this looks good, or at least aren't too bothered by it. And the ones who do recognize it usually just mention it in passing, neglecting to elaborate deeper than the fact that it looks fake or uncanny valley-esque. But it's so much more than that. And at least in the case of Thor and honestly more modern Disney movies than we realize, it's so bad that it even changes the genre. In the scene between Thor and Jane where they're walking down some street, road, hallway, in Omnipotent City, it looks like they're on a freaking Minecraft server. The background looks so fake and lifeless and out of focus. Because no place like this has ever existed on Earth, there's no way we as viewers would ever be able to relate something so obviously crafted to something in the real world to help ground it, and there's no way the filmmakers could replicate that feeling. Now you may be saying, yeah, well it's not supposed to be real, they're literally in the palace of the gods. So my question for you is, have you ever been to Lothlorien or Rivendell? How about Shiz or Willy Wonka's freaking chocolate factory? The reason all of these places feel real is because they are rooted in real places, shot on location and accented by visual effects. We get establishing shots, moments where characters interact with the environment around them, and real things happening in the background, rather than computer-generated NPCs doing the same two motions over and over again. Even the crowd in the Boonta Eve pod race in The Phantom Menace feels more real than this, and they were literally a million colored Q-tips glued to miniature sets, with well-placed sound design adding life and movement. Not only this, but the fact that the camera just sits in front of the four characters of the scene as they walk forward is a blocking choice that makes this moment feel sarcastic and ingenuine. It's as if the filmmakers are blatantly pointing out a common theme with this movie's use of irony, how awkward and dumb the scene is. Rather than treating it seriously and allowing the acting to take the lead, they lean into lazy editing and cinematography that follows a more comedic style rather than that of an action adventure, even if this is meant to be a moment to break the tension. The reason why this is a problem is because this movie does believe it's a comedy. When you watch it, all signs point to the fact that it's trying to subvert expectations to generate a cheap laugh. It's trying to be ironic. But the hitch they've run into is the egregious misuse of irony that makes these moments come across as jaded, self-loathing, and therefore easily forgotten. In trying to be funny, they're just making fun of themselves in a way they don't even realize, and it's not even funny how bad it is. This is a common theme among many comedies of the day, with the rise of meme culture and how with it our understanding of humor has rooted itself in cynicism, uncomfortable self-awareness, and the overall humorization of constantly questioning yourself. This isn't meant to be a critique of these types of comedy in the real world, and it would be silly for me to judge on internet culture that I engage with and enjoy on a daily basis. Where I draw the line is when this weird obsession with self and need to point out the awkwardness in every situation becomes a storytelling device in the name of irony. Why do we feel the need to lace every encounter with a painstaking amount of quote-unquote humor that really just slows the story down? Why is every moment that could actually be engaging undercut with a stupid gag? And why, oh why, does Stormbreaker have more character development than anyone else in the film? These are seriously the kind of short gags and jokes meant for a 15-second TikTok or reel. They aren't meant to add emotional depth to a broader context because there either is no context or the entirety of the internet is going into the overall comedic effect. I don't know if they think they're just being clever and pushing the envelope by bringing in this weird self-aware, real-world type of irony, but all it does is pull you out of the sincerity and emotional depth of what's going on, which is the entire point of telling a story. Instead, all they do is achieve a tone of cynicism. It's as if they think that this form of cheap sarcasm is passable as a rhetorical device, but all this does is invite a sense of disdain, as if everything that's happening on screen is stupid and pointless. So if that's the case, why are we even here watching the movie? Why has someone decided to make the movie? While sarcasm is a form of irony, there are a lot of misconceptions, especially when we're considering irony as a rhetorical or storytelling device. There are moments when the different types of irony drive the story forward through creating suspense and tension to end up in some kind of emotional release that can be either good or bad for us and the characters. And the way these types of irony are used can change depending on the genre as well. In fact, this is what makes some of the greatest storytellers, as they're able to discern how to use the audience's expectations to craft a suspenseful thriller, tear-jerking drama, or even spirited action comedy alike. In the specific case of verbal irony, we often shortcut how we understand that to just being sarcasm, but not all verbal irony is meant to be sarcastic, nor is it restricted to just one genre. Take the moment when Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight is being interrogated by Batman. As Christian Bale's brooding character asks the Joker why he wants to kill him, it's crucial that we read his response as ironic to the situation rather than sarcastic, as he says, "I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you?" Going on to cite how Batman completes him. If we were to read this as sarcasm, merely saying the opposite of what you mean in order to achieve a comedic effect, it changes our entire understanding of the Joker, as he really does believe that Batman completes him. This is what allows the irony to heighten the drama and suspense, a strategy that the greatest directors master when it comes to a sick and twisted villain. In fact, it's Christopher Nolan's twisted use of verbal irony, a device that we usually see as comedic, that is what makes this scene so sinister. The Joker's conviction creates a space for us to react. Do we laugh? Gasp, simply stare in disbelief? Because the villain is usually supposed to be in the direct opposition to the hero, and we've already seen the great lengths the hero goes to be in opposition to the villain. There's a moment when we don't know how to react. It's in this space that we find the purpose of that irony and its weight on the genre, solidifying it as so much more than just sarcasm. When the knight from Monty Python says, "'Tis but a flesh wound," I honestly don't think that it's sarcastic. There isn't some hint of hidden disdain or that he's stating the obvious. Instead, it feels like he actually believed that it's just a flesh wound, especially in the way he tries to continue on. But we, as the audience, as well as other characters, can see that it is anything but the case. At the very least, this opens space for the audience to wonder whether or not he's serious, and that can also contribute to the overall irony and comedic impact as it heightens the absurdity of the situation. The reason why I'm ragging on sarcasm is, well, just consider why we use sarcasm. Usually it's to mock or tease. We use it to poke fun at something or some situation, such as, "Can you drive any slower?" Other times we say the opposite of what we mean to jab at the incompetence or mistake of somebody else, such as, "No, I love it when you make fun of my nose, actually," or, "No, I actually love waiting out here in the rain." We use it as a way to say, "How could you not see the obvious, and why do I have to point this out to you?" And whether or not such jokes are taken as lighthearted or more personally, it's clear that the overall tone of sarcasm is disdain and capitalizing on mockery in order to be funny. This is what I believe plagues so much of Thor, and honestly a lot of what Disney has given us in recent years, because while the sarcasm is easily digested and forgotten and fast-paced social media use, the same cannot be said of telling stories through larger mediums that are filled with countless individual artists who have dreamed and worked their whole lives to bring a story to the silver screen. With this immature use of sarcasm in an attempt to be ironic, these stories become so much less than the art they are meant to be, even if the intention was to create a laugh, because instead of laughing at what's going on, it feels more like we're laughing at them. Or at the very least, we see just how blatantly unfunny it all is, ultimately allowing the tone of disdain and mockery to pervade the screen and make a home in the seat next to us. This is, yet again, where The Fall Guy succeeds and where Love and Thunder fails. Because while it does point directly at itself in a similar way that Love and Thunder does, I don't feel like I'm supposed to make fun of it as an audience member. I don't feel like giving it the Twilight treatment, where I constantly come back just to find a new reason to laugh at it. It feels more like it knows what it's doing, and I can trust the moments that are meant to be kitschy, and there's a reason why this kitschiness works. Instead of using the absurd as the primary focus of generating a comedy, The Fall Guy achieves true irony, not just because of its sincerity, but because it allows that irony to flourish within the already established factory of intrigue, suspense, and enjoyment in the story. The Forest of Arden, Metal Storm, the movie within a movie. the carnivalesque.
I always wondered why they made the choice of the plot to be driven primarily by creating this action movie while the actual movie is going on. Why not just keep the storyline that Colt is a stuntman, solving a mystery surrounding the star he's a double for, and use the time given to Metalstorm to further complicate his adventure trying to make everything right again? Why not spend more time on Colt overcoming the trauma of his accident to ultimately make a triumphant return to doing stunts at the end? On top of that, there's a lot about making a movie within a movie that can confuse the audience and bloat the pacing. So why was Metalstorm so necessary? It's because it is exactly what allows the irony to be successful in this film without being an outright mockery of the film industry and stunt community alike. In fact, it's the ironic situation that the entire plot hinges on and is what makes it a true action comedy. To begin, there are many moments where Metalstorm acts as a container that carries both Jodie and Colt's character development, allowing them to challenge their societal norms in the way that the Forest of Arden does for Rosalind in Orlando. Jodie gets to experience being more assertive, taking on a role in the industry that typically women don't. While a character like her in an action comedy with a dominant male lead would typically be restricted to a character arc challenged by her conflict with Colt, she is able to instead exist outside of that norm, showing trust in him early on and a willingness to work together, not only making her a more compelling character, but also further solidifying the role of Metalstorm as the carnivalesque. She isn't bound by an arc that depends on her either learning to embrace her femininity through depending on the love interest or becoming more masculine by taking the lead. Instead, she leads and listens, allowing the feminine qualities she already has to strengthen the more masculine and vice versa. And yet there are moments of creating Metalstorm that feel absurd, such as Ryder's unironic McConaughey impression, the subtle nods to the Dune soundtrack, and even the absolutely bonkers action sequence that dominates appropriately the better part of the third act. Because of this, it would be so easy for this entire movie to get caught up in either the zaniness of the double world or outright mockery of it, but instead it's able to find this incredible balance that we've never seen before. Metalstorm is silly, driven forward by one-liners and cliches, and yet the filmmakers allow the same world to contribute to the development of our real characters. This kind of meta use of the movie within a movie echoes the idea that all movies are meant to impart as well as the experience of watching a movie. We go somewhere and sit in front of a silver screen in a dark room and see something completely fake happen right before our eyes, but we're somehow able to grow, to be inspired, to change, because we sincerely accept, even just for a couple of hours, that it's real. Just like Jodie and Colt, we develop as characters by simply experiencing this movie making process, and in a way, the filmmakers are using this dynamic to also acknowledge the incredible journey and growth that it takes to create a film. With Colt, Metalstorm allows him to embark on an adventure where he exists outside the trope of being just the stunt guy, which is this movie's obvious MacGuffin, but they take it a step further by showing Colt actively participating in Metalstorm rather than just chasing a plot outside of the movie. As we see him participate in several stunt sequences, he's humbled. Just as with Orlando, the carnivalesque gets a chance to not only chase the love interest, but see her in her element, to see the full scope of her potential. As the couple runs into countless obstacles outside of filming, we constantly see them reunited and able to reconcile on the set of Metalstorm. There are certainly plenty of moments that occur on set that contribute to the confusion, such as Jodie setting Colt on fire over and over again, the fight in the trailer, and having to fight off both Gale and Ryder in the end. But these moments ultimately pull the two closer together, which is exactly what the carnivalesque is meant to do. In fact, we even get this really great moment where the disconnect between the carnivalesque and the real world, i.e. the set of Metalstorm and Offset, becomes even more visceral when Jodie calls Colt to discuss possibly using split screen. We see one of them existing in the world, calling to the other, but literally are blocked by the barrier that exists between this pastoral mode and the traditional setting. And remember As You Like It with Rosalind and her cousin who escaped to the Forest of Arden, Shakespeare's carnivalesque? The cousin's name is Aliena. But guess who else is named Aliena? That's right, the alien princess female lead of Metalstorm. Shamelessly, I will admit that it was originally this connection that inspired the 17 pages worth of video essay you now see before you. As the carnivalesque strives to further complicate their worlds, somehow their communication gets better and contributes to their character development, making an effective use of irony to not just add humor, but sincerity to their story and ultimately a satisfying payoff in the end. This is also what makes it a true action comedy, because although it pokes fun at itself in the way that Thor does, or Deadpool, or any other buddy comedy out there, there's a specific purpose and place where that exists. It pokes fun at itself through Metalstorm, by turning every trope and cliche related to the movie industry up to 1,000. The insufferable lead, constant pressure from production companies, and even how ridiculous it all looks during production. But what allows it to avoid the sarcastic cynicism of these other films is the fact that this frivolity is limited to Metalstorm, the carnivalesque, a place that the audience doesn't need to accept as real but is still crucial to the story. story. We're able to laugh at the moments that feel over the top or the ones that feel a little too on the nose because these moments exist in the same place that adds all the essential components of a well-rounded story. Emotional depth, risk and reward, character arcs, and setbacks that set up a satisfying payoff in the end. It's an action comedy that wants to be an action comedy. It's not like Thor, a comedy marketed as an action-adventure film, or even an action film filled with cringeworthy moments branded as modern comedy. It values its own self-awareness and uses it for more than just making fun of a crucial part of the industry that has often been undervalued. And by no means am I saying that a film can't poke fun at itself without intentional mockery. There just has to be a specific reason for it, and the filmmakers have to know what they're doing. In Glass Onion, Rian Johnson set out to criticize society's tendency to glorify the elite, therefore making us the ones giving them influence. And he did it through subverting expectations as a form of self-mockery. He knew what he was doing when he made all those jokes that nearly break the fourth wall, or when he subverts certain tropes tied to the mystery genre. In a way, we can think of Braun's Private Island as another Carnivalesque, a place where expectations and traditional societal roles are challenged in order to reveal each character's true nature and contribute to their overall development. Through each caricature magnified to an excess, the audience is able to recognize their references to the real world, creating the comedic situation that adds social commentary to these tropes. Quote, marked by an often mocking or satirical challenge to authority and the traditional social hierarchy, unquote, by Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the Carnivalesque is what allows Glass Onion's use of irony to generate not just a laugh, but also confidence in the audience. As we make those implied connections to the real world from the irony, we feel intelligent and trusted, effectively making the story about so much more than the ridiculous moments. This essay wasn't intended to diss on Thor, Love and Thunder so much. That conversation deserved its own video, which I will probably be working on in the near future, but I can't help that it's just the perfect example of society's tendency nowadays to equate self-awareness to effective irony and therefore comedy, because comedy is so much more than just silly one-liners or that he's right behind me, isn't he moments. It's about making your audiences feel intelligent, engaging them in making their own connections, and the surprise that comes when they finally get it. We get the, well, this is awkward moments that try to break the fourth wall, but really don't. And to add further insult to injury, when the fourth wall is broken, it isn't even used for an authentic purpose meant to add intricacy and nuance to the story. It feels like they think that it's enough just to be self-aware, and that's what contributes to overall social commentary, but it's the audience's ability to draw these connections and develop their own narrative that helps us feel not only like we are in on the joke, but actually able to enjoy it without cringing. It's the difference between having inside jokes with your friends and watching other groups of people perform their inside jokes. With your friends, it's funny because you know the context, you actively participate in the joke, but watching others often feels alienating, generating secondhand embarrassment more than anything. I'd love to talk more about the cinematography and editing of this film and how its loyalty to the action genre are what make this movie so great, but for the purpose of this essay, I'll save my thoughts on that for another day. Instead, I'll provide a brief sneak peek, I guess. The Fall Guy is an action comedy that wants and is trying to be an action comedy, as it uses humor not as the final punchline to each and every action sequence, but rather as something that builds ironic tension before and throughout the action sequence. Notice how when Colt and Dan are defending themselves against Dressler and his crew, that using the props from the prop wall is both ironic and meant to help drive the action forward. Notice how the cinematography and editing work to set up the scene, building tension through letting the camera linger on elements in the action sequence that will flash by too quickly for us to recognize in the moment. The music builds tension as well, to eventually be cut out entirely, allowing the sound design to be a highlight in the action through the thud of each deafening punch and gunshot. There's also when Colt goes to meet with Ryder's drug dealer in the Blacklight Club. In a sea of people already dressed ridiculously, he somehow manages to be sporting the most flashy ensemble, despite being the last person who wants to be there. A scene in which the drug dealer himself says it's a movie, it's not meant to be real, as Colt begins going on his acid trip. And yet, the neon yellow is what makes us able to recognize him throughout the action. Although the scene is one of the zanier sequences, using effects that are less serious and over the top for a traditional action movie, it still makes sense within the context of the scene and setting. Having been drugged, the audience seeing what Colt sees allows the action to be vaulted to that comedic stage without feeling ridiculous or unbelievable because it stays true to its genre. And having the stunt guy, someone who is never meant to engage in action with all the cool effects that are meant to intensify a movie, actually experience a fight in which he is hallucinating these effects only adds to the irony. In essence, it works because it adds to the irony. It knows what it's doing. The Fall Guy takes the absurdity of a stuntman solving a mystery on a film set by actually doing in real life what he pretends to do for a living. Now, the filmmakers could have taken this idea, acknowledging how absurd it was, and turned it into a buddy action comedy, swinging way too hard at comedy with an unserious protagonist, shooting for a girl way out of his league who only has eyes for the star of the film, simultaneously trivializing not just the stunt community but also various gender stereotypes in film. Instead, they created something that honors not just stuntmen but anyone who works behind the scenes in some capacity. They highlight the everyman who works with a big name star, bringing the entire production down to earth on a level we can all relate with. They allow female characters to be more than just one note, quirky, gorgeous, or ambitious, and rather all three manifested in different ways. They allow male characters to lead the action through more than just a one-dimensional mastery over every possible fighting style and weapon or the harebrained convenient solutions of a screwball comedy. It's focused, intelligent, and serious, yet ludicrous, hilarious, and entertaining. A true action comedy whose irony solidifies this identity through the most obvious yet somehow forgotten attribute in all of storytelling: sincerity. As we've discovered, irony is so much more than just comedy, just as comedy is so much more than getting a laugh out of the audience. It's treating the audience as intelligent. It's using tension to increase suspense and understanding how to wield that suspense depending on the genre or overall context of said irony. But no matter the form, irony must be used with sincerity, and its execution can be what makes or breaks a good story, because if you don't have sincerity, then you're taking the comedic punch from your audience completely. Instead of allowing them to observe a situation, being authentically portrayed on screen, and drawing their own conclusion, you draw the conclusion for them and strip them of the joy of discovery. Take Emily Blunt's portrayal of Jodie, for example. There are so many opportunities for her to give a lackluster performance, trying to be over the top with certain facial expressions, timing, or even subtle disdain in each scene, but instead, she displays a total fidelity to the role, especially as things get ridiculous. In the scene where she's absolutely destroying Colt in the alien costume, there's no cheeky moments where she turns to the camera and makes some silly remark. There's no long shot of her looming over Colt to show how much of a baddie she is. She doesn't smile or act overly confident. When she's on the phone with Colt as he's about to pull the death-defying stunt on the boat, her reactions and focus on what Colt is saying is sincere. She believes him and the situation that she's in, playing into all the sincerity of the action side of this film and leaving the comedy to be interpreted by the audience. Even when Gail is telling her that Colt has left as we cut from Colt trying to save Alma to this scene in the karaoke bar, it's the editing that is the most comedic, leaving the drama and devastation to Emily Blunt's performance, even as she's literally singing against all odds as a kind of soundtrack to the entire situation. And with Ryan Gosling, it's no different. Even when he's high and tracking down the drug dealer, reading post-it notes on Ryder's wall, and listening to Freaking All Too Well, he's not trying to be overtly funny, and the only way we recognize that is because his performance stays true to the action. From both of them, we get genuine reactions. We get the sense that they are real people participating in a real situation, which is what engages us as an audience in the first place. It is then the editing, cinematography, sound and production design, and overall directing that are what execute the bulk of comedic effect. And even then, we can still feel their sincerity in telling the story as we get these epic lens flares, dramatic lighting, and seamless action sequences that honestly make watching this movie feel like a breeze. For a moment, let's consider Thor: Love and Thunder again. In comparison to The Fall Guy, are you more likely to equate Love and Thunder to The Fall Guy, or rather Metal Storm, the satirical carnivalesque meant to be the crux of ironic frivolity and hypocrisy in this film? To me, Metal Storm is so much more reminiscent of Love and Thunder because it's too obsessed with itself. It's trying to be smart, to be bigger than what it is, in order to achieve nothing. Because in the end, the true mark of a great story is not in how good you think your creation is, but the extent to which others continue to make that story come alive. It's a value that Shakespeare understood, as he learned from the classics, and a value that leads us all the way to appreciating The Fall Guy for the masterpiece we have yet to make it to be. Thank you guys so much for joining me today in this video essay covering The Fall Guy and comedy and irony. We talked about genre and how all of those things come together in The Fall Guy. As I was watching this movie, I could not shake the feeling that there was just something so different and interesting about it, and I really enjoyed getting to research further into irony and Shakespeare and how it all connects. I once again will admit that learning that the name Aliena is in both As You Like It and Metal Storm is honestly the reason why I started writing this essay, and then all the research just came after that. But it was really fun. I'm really glad that I was able to do it. So let me know what topics or films you guys would like me to cover in the future. I really love getting to consider classical ideas and schools of thought when it comes to film and how that influences the filmmaking process and philosophy, whether it's Western influence from the Renaissance or more Buddhist ideals, different religious ideals from the East. It's just really interesting how those ideas get expressed in film. The philosophy of each individual director when it comes to making a film is just so cool. It really makes the film feel so much bigger than just a movie and more of an experience, which is why I love film so much. I think it's so special that it's just so much more than the story playing out in front of you, and you can turn it into a lesson on history and the way that our ideals have developed over time. I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, turn on your notifications so you can get notified for when I drop more videos like this one. And once again, please comment, tell me what you would like to see and hear in the future, and I will definitely get on writing. I love writing and I love film, and thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a wonderful day. Bye!